Pennsylvania has roads, a lot of them, more miles of road than 3/4 of the other states. Combined, the highway systems of Hawaii, Rhode Island, Delaware, Vermont, New Hampshire, Alaska, Connecticut, Maine, and Wyoming are only 97% that of Pennsylvania's. Even New York, the state with the city, loses to PA by 11,000 miles. That's crazy. Not all those roads can be winners, though. I've got a list of rule breakers here, and there's one in particular that annoys me the most. Before we get started, I want to introduce some important names and features. First, we have the Location Referencing System, or LRS, whose job is to keep inventory of all state-maintained roads. These can be interstates, U.S. numbered highways, state highways, quadrant roads, or various other miscellaneous strips of land where motor vehicles can go, like interchanges, rest areas, and escape ramps. The name quadrant route might not sound familiar, but that's because they're not signed the way those other roads are. They're sometimes back roads, but they can also be traffic-heavy routes like the Birmingham Bridge in Pittsburgh that is internally known as State Route 2085. That's something else unique to quadrant roads. They're called state routes instead of Pennsylvania routes. The various types of routes in Pennsylvania also have a general naming scheme that corresponds to their location and direction. Interstates and numbered highways mostly follow their numbering rules that I mentioned in my video about I-99, those rules being that even-numbered interstates run east-west, while odd-numbered interstates run north-south, and larger numbers are in the north and east, while U.S. highways are the opposite, and state routes used to have a pattern too. Originally, two-digit odd-numbered highways were located farther south when the last digit was lower and moved north as that number got higher. So PA 21 would have been located south of PA 29, and even-numbered highways started in the east and moved west, so PA 32 was east of PA 38. As the network grew larger and routes changed, this system became less of a rule and more of a general suggestion. Three-digit routes, similar to interstates and U.S. highways, acted as branch routes that connected smaller areas to larger ones served by higher throughput roadways. This is still sometimes the case, and since those federally instituted highways are considered state roads in Pennsylvania, there are three-digit PA routes that are auxiliary routes of interstates and U.S. highways. We'll get more into that later, though. Another quirk of state-maintained highways in PA is that they're divided in segments. These are generally about half a mile long and increase as you travel north and east, and they're different depending on which side of a divided highway you take. The segment number and four-digit state route number can be found on a white postcard-sized sign at the point between segments. Enough exposition though, let's get to the good stuff. First on the docket, we have PA 283. Having lived in the area and commuted daily on this road for work, I feel highly qualified to speak about it. Running from I-283 in Lower Swatara to US 30 in Lancaster, it connects the capital to the Red Rose City and makes a nice little triangle between those two cities in York. Being that it starts at I-283, why are they not the same road? Because of a technicality with PA 283 starting at an at-grade intersection and I-283 continuing a few hundred feet past their interchange to meet the turnpike, the state route does not meet interstate standards. There's an issue though. I-283 takes precedence over PA 283 in the LRS as State Route 283, leaving PA 283 to be called State Route 300. Except it's only called that on segment markers. But wait, there's another issue. As of August 16, 2021, segment marker 300 in the eastbound direction labels the road as State Route 283. That was the only segment marker I noticed with the wrong designation, however, and at the time Google Maps showed that this was not the case. Since the Street View images were updated in August of 2022, they reflect the sign as it is presently. For anyone interested, the coordinates are on screen. Frankly, this bothered me so much that I often stopped along the side of the road when driving. Maybe, just maybe, they thought that both numbers being 300 would be too confusing, but that logic doesn't make any more sense to me. There are only two numbers on the sign, one of them is labeled as a state route, and these signs are primarily for internal use. Having two different numbers for it is already confusing enough, so having just one sign mislabel it leaves more room for misunderstanding. At least I-283 isn't long enough to have a segment 300, but I think the best solution is to merge the two roads. PA 283 is not the only freeway that ends at an at-grade intersection. I-83 does just that in Baltimore. And it also would not be the only one to have an interchange with itself. I-76 does just that near King of Prussia. So what's the issue? I doubt the different signed directions for either highway is the issue. They both travel northwest-southeast, but I-283 is signed north-south and PA-283 is signed east-west. Regardless of the signed direction they choose, it would not be breaking any rules since auxiliary routes are not numbered based on direction anyway. The only issue I can think of is that the federal government just doesn't want to give any more money to maintain the route. Considering Lancaster doesn't have a direct connection to any interstates and the nearest one is the Turnpike, it would be nice to see one connecting the city to a major thruway. Sure, PA 283 is already up to freeway standards, and so are US 30 and US 222 north of the city, but they travel in every direction but south. Yes, US 222 does go south through the city all the way to US 1 in Maryland, but it's not up to freeway standards. I could see two potential additions. PA 283 or I 283 could connect to Millersville and Willow Street as either a southern part of a beltway around the city or going south-southeast from Willow Street along the current alignment of PA 272 until it meets US 222. Here are the issues with those ideas though. A beltway around the city would not solve the problem of a southern freeway connection, and continuing 283 along 272 would require a large-scale upgrade project. Let's not forget that either of these would likely do more harm than good by adding another urban freeway through a small city. Truthfully, Lancaster doesn't need a high-speed connection to the south. 272 and 222 do a fine job of handling traffic flow through the sparsely populated area, and there really isn't anything directly south. Once you hit Aberdeen, Maryland, you're at the Chesapeake and you need to go east or west. Considering that, Lancastrians have access to the necessary east-west highways that will eventually get them to a north-south one. Did I just create a problem and spend time solving it? Yes, but I still believe State Route 300 should be eliminated and its current alignment should become part of I-283. Now that we're back on the topic of routes with two different designations, I want to introduce a few other similar cases I discovered. Before finding out about the discrepancy with 283, I had no idea that any of these had mismatched route designations, but there were actually 6 other cases like this, like PA 380 is actually State Route 400 because I-380 exists. The difference here, however, is that the two roads don't connect and are a 4-hour drive apart. The state route is also several decades older than the entire interstate system, so I'm willing to give it a pass. PA 99 and 86 are the same story and use state route designations 699 and 886 respectively. PA 97, however, is a little bit of a different story. I-97 is in Maryland, so that's not an issue. There are actually 2 PA 97s, one in Adams County in the south-central part of the state, and the other in the northwest corner in Erie. So which is the real one? Based on the numbering scheme I mentioned earlier, 97 in Erie should hold the same state route designation because it's farther north, but that's not the case. The one in Erie is called 197 under the LRS, while the one in Adams County is State Route 97. Being that they're so far apart, I don't think it's a huge deal or that it would be confusing for many drivers, so I can give it a pass. Pennsylvania also has a portion of State Route 222 that's not part of US 222. While this segment of road was considered as an extension of the US route, it never earned that designation. This case reminds me of I-4 in Florida and how State Route 400, the state's internal designation for the highway, continues east after the end of the interstate in the Daytona area. So again, since both US 222 and PA 222 share the same numbers for both internal and external bookkeeping, I can get over it. Next, I want to look at PA 3. This road is not the original Route 3 that crossed from West Virginia to New Jersey, but its successor. Currently, Route 3 runs a little more than 24 miles through the Philly area, and for a short distance in Center City, uses a one-way pair of quadrant routes with different numbers. While PA 3 isn't the only state route to use a one-way pair, it seems to be the only one that uses different numbers for each direction of traffic. Again though, because it doesn't conflict with any other major roads, I can learn to live with it. So, if I'm okay with all these other rule breaks, why does 283 get on my nerves? One reason is because it's not considered an extension of the other road with which it shares a name, and since they're in the same area, this can be really confusing for drivers. Even if I-283 didn't exist, but the state highway did, that would be better. Like I mentioned earlier, some state routes in Pennsylvania are meant to act as branch or auxiliary routes to their bigger brother interstates and US routes. This can be seen with PA 581, a branch of I-81 southwest of Harrisburg, or PA 576, a branch of I-76 near Pittsburgh that will soon gain an interstate designation. If PA 283 carried the LRS designation of SR 283 and replaced the interstate, it would have all the functions of a branch route without the confusion of which 283 to take. That being said, I would also accept calling the current PA 283 PA 300 instead. Renaming is always an option, like how PA 295 in York Haven became PA 297 when I-295 came to the state. It only changed names in 2018 to match its new internal designation, and this has been successful. Sure, there are only a couple thousand people who live in the area around 297, but name changes also happen on more major routes, like I-81E became I-380. Rip off the bandage and let change happen. With that rant out of the way, thank you for watching. Swerve around those Pennsylvania potholes, and have a great rest of your day.